Kat, are you good?
Okay, I think this is everybody, so we'll go ahead and get started since we have about an hour. Thank you everybody who joined in person, and for those of you joining on Zoom, we really appreciate it. Today's going to be our third bargaining session, bargaining for Article 10, involving our stipends with UFGAU and UF Administrative Bargaining Team. So first, thank you all again for joining. We're gonna go through a quick presentation before we discuss our counter proposal. And here's a little bit of an outline of what today's going to look like. We're gonna do some introductions because I know some of you, this may be your first bargaining session, go over some of UFGAU's interests in response to UF's previous presentation, address some of UF's direct interests, and then go over our counter proposal and discuss broadly. Starting with introductions. So first and foremost, my name is Amanda Marquis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the chief bargainer for UFGAU. And I'm joined by...
Yeah, I'm Rachel Hartnett. That's actually inaccurate. I'm no longer UFGAU co-president. I wrapped it up a few days ago, but I am a member of the bargaining committee and I'm acting grievance chair.
And I'm Sander.
And I also wanted to give us a chance to introduce some of our new members of the bargaining team. We have Brandon Silva, who I believe is not present because he has a conflicting meeting right now, but we also have Austin, who I'd like to give the chance to introduce himself via Zoom, if you'd like.
Hi, I'm Austin. I'm one of the first year graduate students here. So I just joined the team, but I'm happy to be here. So
Awesome. Thanks, Austin. Okay, so starting with some UF values and interests. So to summarize from last week, UF gave a wonderful presentation outlining their current proposal and outlining their current interests along with their perceived UFGAU interests. And I kind of just wanted to break down in case there's any ambiguity and show what GAU in particular is prioritizing, so there's no question moving forward about what's going to be contained in our proposals and why. So first and foremost, you are absolutely right that our main concern is increasing the minimum stipend. That is our main goal. That is our main reason for negotiating, specifically because this dollar amount is what affects GAs the most. It affects our material conditions. It affects how we request funding, both for centrally and non-centrally funded GAs. And this amount affects GAs across the board. Second is avoiding percentage raises. This one is really important to us because this is the least equitable way we can start to implement raises for GAs. We talked a lot about equity in our last meeting, and somebody who's making $17,000 a year on a 9-month appointment in the English department isn't going to have a lot of wiggle room with a 3% raise versus somebody who may not need this raise as much in a more well-funded department, making anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000, even on a 9-month appointment. Lastly, is we are really trying to lean forward to stop using one-time payments for current GAs. This money, we feel time and time again, as long as I've been bargaining and attending the bargaining sessions, we've been getting these one-time payments, which honestly just feels like a quick payout to alleviate a problem that comes back in our next sessions. And by stopping these one-time payments and reappropriating that money towards what we are clearly outlining that we're prioritizing, we feel like we can alleviate some of those issues and create a more long-term solution. Last and certainly not least, we would like for raises to keep up with inflation. There was, for some reason, a lot of confusion at our last session regarding questions pertaining to inflation. But again, we keep seeing that UF is prioritizing these 3% one-time raises for GAs, which does not create a long-term solution for the financial issues that we're facing while working here. And at the end of the day, it is a pay cut. If we look at these two graphs, which address a brief history of our minimum stipends on 9-month and 12-month appointments, we can see in our orange line, which is our nominal value of increase, that it does appear that our stipends are slowly going up and plateauing and then slowly going up over time. But functionally, we are getting a pay cut because this blue line is showing the actual adjusted value of our dollar in terms of inflation. And this is clearly going down over time and meeting in the middle. So we are not actually perceivably getting a raise that means anything. We still can't pay for groceries in the same way, especially over time. And we see the same trend in our 12-month appointees. And if we take a closer look just specifically at 9-month appointments, this graph shows on the x-axis, we have our year, and on our y-axis, we have our stipend amount. And we clearly see in orange, which is adjusted living wage versus our blue stipend bar, that living wage is going up and our stipends are not. Our stipends are plateauing. We are not seeing any reasonable increase. In other words, in clear, plain as day text, our wages are not keeping up with inflation. And this is something, again, that we have known. Brooke mentioned this in our last session, that this is a main point of bargaining, but it's not something that we can ignore. It's something that is negatively affecting GAs. And it's something that should be implemented into our contracts. And this is, again, just the very take-home message of why we're all here today. We value, there was a lot of question and ambiguity about our stakeholders, why we value this, what we prioritize over X, Y, Z, but we're here again for the same reason that we're here over and over again, and it's because we value a livable wage without being rent burdened, food insecure, or in debt for the basic needs, just to work and contribute to the University of Florida's mission. You guys did a really good job last week of outlining your own interests. There was a long list of different interests that the university may have when we were discussing where we could possibly commonly meet in the middle. And I just wanted to address some of these interests directly, some of the ones that we found to be most important. The first and foremost on your list was offering a competitive package. So we did a little bit of research beyond University of Michigan. We looked at our top 5 competitors and compared various statistics, including our cost of living, including our fees, including our tuition. And UF, above all, pays second to last comparatively to our top 5 competitors. They pay their GAs second to last. So our stipend is extremely lacking competitively. UF also,
clarifying question.
yeah.
Which was it the U.S. News and World Report? Which ranking system?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pass you guys. I'm passing UF administrative bargaining team a broken down table of different statistics. And then in the next slide, there's actually a table that breaks down
Thank you.
where we're getting these values from. And
And
this
it is the US World.
but it is the
America,
US news list.
News list top 5, which includes, I think, 6, because I believe we're tied with UVA.
No, we're tied with University of North Carolina.
Sorry,
Chapel
North
Hill.
Carolina.
Okay. Yep, so you guys can definitely take a look over that. UF also provides second to last in fee relief. This was a really big point that I'm going to touch on today, considering that fee relief is currently being bargained and is a main point of your guys' counter proposal. We provide second to last in fee relief to our GAs. And last, but certainly not least, this is one of the most alarming ones, is that UF spends the least amount of money on their graduate students, meaning they have to shell out the least amount of money on their graduate students comparatively to their top 5 competitors, i.e. UF has a lot of wiggle room comparatively, and it's a shameful thing that we're trying to bargain fee relief right now. This is the table, a summarized table of what I passed out to UF administrative bargaining team. And what it shows is how much does UF pay. How much does it pay out of pocket for its GAs? We see our top 5 ranked universities, as well as their university names, their respective 9-month stipends as an example of how much comparative schools are making, and their tuition for both in and out of state, along with their fee relief. Each of the 5 or 6 universities in this case, in the squares below, show when you add the tuition and the fees that the university is paying per graduate student, UF pays the bare minimum. It pays the bare minimum out of pocket to supply graduate students, whereas schools like University of California are paying $58,000 per graduate student, which is clearly a huge disparity. Continuing to address UF's interests, this was something that Patrick and I have been privately discussing or informally discussing because there's a lot of ambiguity about how the university receives funding for graduate student stipends. There's a lot of things that can be cleared up about how we receive funding at the state level. And something that we want to know clearly and explicitly is how does the university request funding at the state level, and what can we be doing as a unit to help expedite this process or help contribute to this process in a way where we could have more funding to be given to graduate student stipends or directed directly to graduate student stipends. This was just an example in terms of our offer being budgetarily sound. We have secured our highest raise functionally back in 2017, when accounting for inflation. So when we account for inflation in 2017, our minimum stipend for a 9-month appointment was $16,000. But in today's dollar adjusted, that's $19,821. This is just to say that we have been able to functionally get raises that are closer to a living wage. And when we look at it in this point of view, we're not asking for a 78% increase. We're asking for 33% approximately. We've been able to receive a raise of this amount in 2017. And although nominally last year was a very big raise for GA, it's clearly not enough to cover the minimum stipend. And it's clearly not enough to keep up with a living wage.
Can you go back and go through that again?
Sure.
So can you explain that second bullet point again?
Yeah, so the minimum.
The basis on 2017, the way you did your inflation calculation. Can you go over that again, please?
Yeah, Austin, are you on the call still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
So I took the minimum stipends for each year, so starting in 2014 and through 2023, and we adjusted them to make those same graphs that we saw earlier, where it showed what our value was after accounting for inflation. So I took the highest value, highest year we had ever made money, which was in 2017. We made $19,821. And then so that would be in 2023 dollars, and then comparing that to the amount of an increase we were asking for today. So it's basically saying in 2017 we were making more money when adjusted for inflation, and so the first 30% increase of any of our wages would be going towards addressing that inflation that hasn't been addressed for the past several years. And then on top of that, we are asking for additional 32.4% increase to bring us up to a living wage.
As opposed to just saying that we're flat out asking for 78% directly compared to University of Michigan, for example.
Yeah, Austin is our numbers guy.
And then the third and last interest that I'll address for UF, because the slide did have many different interests, was communicativeness and perceived fairness for GAs. And this is something that I really want to harp on, that in order to be communicative and to have a more collaborative effort in bargaining, like, we have to have our needs addressed. We very explicitly outlined what our priorities are, and your last proposal didn't address any of them. They went further to take away things that we value a lot. UFGAU has received the same exact pushback from administration as long as I've been involved in bargaining. And it doesn't feel like bargaining in good faith when every year we get the same one-time 3% raise, when we've expressed time and time again that this is not a long-term solution, and it's not something that we are prioritizing when we come to the bargaining table. We've explicitly outlined, again, just so there's no ambiguity, increases to the minimum stipend is our #1 priority, and then avoiding one-time payment and percentage raises to provide the most equitable contract for GAs. So before we get into our counterproposal, this is the last part that I really want to address from UF's counterproposal, and it's really breaking down the language and the math for taking away fee relief and providing a one-time 3% raise. For current employees, what this functionally means is that for a 9-month appointee, when we provide a 3% increment and we take away fee relief and make GAs pay fee relief, we are making $1.17 more than just having a 3% increase as we normally do. And for a 12-month appointment, it's even less than that. We're getting an 87-cent raise. And for new employees, this is even worse, considering that your team was very, was very interested in treating all GAs of different appointments of in the same stature. New employees are getting it worse than continuing employees, where they are getting the 3% raise, having to pay their fees, and now they're paying $22 more and paying $16 more than just a 3% increment. And this is not a raise. It's, again, I keep repeating myself, it feels very much like a broken record, but these ruses of raises are not raises that functionally mean anything for GAs, they are a pay cut. And until we account for inflation, we're going to continue seeing pay cuts. So this is our counterproposal today and the contents of the counterproposal. I'll go ahead and, after we go through the details, email you all a copy so you have the full version of the language. But we are again trying to address the minimum stipend and requesting our 9-month appointees at a $26,250 stipend and our 12-month appointees at a $35,000 stipend. The minimum, or the livable wage in Gainesville right now, it fluctuates, but right now it's around $34,000. So this is not an outrageous request. We are planning on keeping fee relief. We took out all of the language taking away fee relief because we're not able to accept an offer that removes fee relief without any kind of significant increase to the stipend, or really anything other to offer besides taking away fee relief and not addressing our concerns. We removed the language involving one-time payments and proposed a 3% annual raise instead, and we will be open to discussing our bargaining timeline in the future, particularly for 25.2, which regards when we open up bargaining in January versus the timeline of other unions on campus. And this is just a summarized version of a screenshot of our current proposal language. I'll email you all the full document once it's time for debrief, but this is if you guys want to look over it, and we're open to discussing any of your thoughts.
Yes, sir. I have just one question before we break and go have a chat.
Sure.
And that is, I appreciate all the work that Austin, I think it was, did with regard to analyzing sort of the inflationary information.
Mm-hmm.
Did you all do any analysis of revenue generation, or was it just inflation?
Revenue generation for?
In terms of the budgetary the budgetary situation, because I appreciate looking at inflation as a compelling factor for how you structure a proposal. But it doesn't look like there was any analysis in terms of the funding given, because I just think it's one way to contextualize it to look at 2017 as sort of a peak. It appears that what the proposal states is that 2017 was a peak of current dollars in that context in terms of what the buying power was of the stipend. What it leaves out of the analysis, and that's why I'm wondering if you considered it, because we think we have to, and that is, how did the revenues of the university change in that time? Or because it appears as if, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, it appears as if inflation is an external compelling factor that's the responsibility solely of management, and that revenue is immaterial and the source of money is immaterial and the budget's immaterial, that it appears as if you're constructing a social responsibility to account for inflation irrespective of budget. That's why I'm just wondering if you look at the budget at all.
Right, we didn't because there's actually,
Patrick, we've never been given the budget. We've asked for the budget multiple times and from UF, and you've never given us any budgetary information.
I will take exception to that. After the first meeting, I said specifically, is there any financial document you need? Are there any financial questions you have? And I actually waited to schedule based on waiting for those questions. And then I was told, no, let's schedule. We don't have any questions.
We sent over, that is not true. We sent over a document asking for budgetary information.
Just general budgetary information? Is there any specific budgetary information you want?
well, okay, actually, before we get into this, quite frankly, it's actually not our jobs to look into UF's budget. It's your guys' jobs to look into the budget. And we're simply requesting what we believe is a fair living wage, but it's not, we don't get paid to sit down and look at UF's finances. We get paid to make a reasonable, compelling argument as to why we deserve to be paid more. And UF's financial team and the UF bargaining team is who's responsible for figuring out how to pay us. We don't request for funds from the state. We don't request for anything. We do our jobs here
Right.
and request a living wage.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand the official GAU position is that revenues are the responsibility of management. The budget is your all responsibility. We will make a compelling argument that you're responsible for finding it. I just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying.
How,
At the next meeting, you can show us what your budgetary constraints are, and we can have a discussion about that, but.
I'm not talking about specific constraints. What I'm talking about is if you're going to have an inflation-based, again, I'm just asking what factors you took into your, I'm not
Yeah, I
asking
mean,
for a
it's
specific,
not
I'm
our
talking about,
We're not in charge of that budget.
no, I understand. I just want to know if it was an informing factor on how you constructed that was it. I'm just asking if it was an informing factor in how you constructed your proposal.
How-
Just a matter of context.
how much money UF has? Was
No, that
that,
changes over time. I mean, we're talking about a 6-year trend analysis, which is what you presented, which I appreciate, against inflation. What I'm saying is, was there any analysis done in terms of how and what ways the funding of UF changed over that? That's all I was wondering.
I think Bryn pretty much summed it up that no, because we don't have that information,
Okay,
because
fair enough.
it's not our job.
All right.
I would like to state for the record here that UF does release a yearly statement of revenues and expenses that is publicly available. So I did look through those while making some of these graphs. I did not look through the 6-year timeline because UF does not provide a timeline of how these revenues are changing over time. And I'm not well versed in the different breakdowns of these. But over the past 2 years, in 2020 to 2021, UF made a net profit of 218 million, or their net position changed by a positive that much. And in 2021 to 2022, it increased by 440 million. So I did find that publicly available online, showing that US position has been positively increasing at least for the past 2 years in a general trend.
Thanks, Austin. And I also really want to address here that regardless of the increase in US revenues or what US revenues are per year, there's a clear gap in the prioritizing of GAs. We understand that you guys can't prioritize or you can't use certain kinds of funds for paying GAs a living wage, but there are ways to prioritize that money and increase the money that you can use to provide towards a stipend.
You guys have any other questions?
We have one question from someone. Do we want to ask it or do we want to wait for the debrief?
Let's go ahead and debrief,
Okay.
Or let's go ahead and caucus just because we're on a limited,
Sounds good. We'll be back.
clock, and then we can discuss.
So do you want to pause the recording then?
Yeah.
Fun places for,
They're at a conference.
Oh.
I'm sure it's a graduate.
yeah, but that means it could be somewhere wonderful right now, or it could be somewhere wonderful right now.
Miami.
Oh, it's not bad.
Okay, Judy just joined.
Oh, here.
No, I admitted her. Oh,
You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, are Judy and Tom back in?
yeah, they
Judy
just
is in.
joined.
Did
Okay,
Tom in
good.
as well?
Yeah, Tom joined.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, I'm here.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, so,
Are you-
Yes.
so thank you all, and Austin, thank you for your work on the financial part of it. So one of the things that I've sort of continued to grapple with, and I'm just gonna be very transparent, as you guys all know that I'm new here. One of the things that I think represents a pretty significant disparity between the two groups is, and I mentioned this last time, is in some of the ways that of the assumptions that we have about our proposals we bring to the table. And, you know, I don't want an answer, but this is going to be the way that we construct our next thing that we bring when we get together next week. And that is the living wage that you all describe has a couple of very important assumptions built into it. And one of the assumptions that you have built into the living wage that you continue to use is that it's a full-time person, a full-time employee. And I think that until and unless we can really have a more comprehensive discussion about that assumption, I think that we're going to continue to be really far apart. So, I mean, I would say that to say, I think that we're going to go back and talk about how to do some comparisons in that respect. I would ask you to do some, again, I'm not looking for an answer. I don't have a question. I just do some discussion and thinking about that, because I think that is going to be one of the things that you're going to want to talk about. And it's going to be part of what we present to you when we get back together next week. So I appreciate the time that you're willing to give sort of our team to sort of digest what you guys had. And again, I appreciate you being willing to meet multiple times. That's helpful for us. And it's helpful to see, you know, what you all are thinking and to be prepared. I appreciate the fact that you all are prepared when we get together. It's important.
So can I ask you to be a little more precise about that?
Sure.
So like, you're saying that everything is with the assumption of full-time employment. So given that we're all 0.5 FTEs, it is the expectation that we're all supposed to supplement the other 0.5 with another job so that we can make those moves?
I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm suggesting is the fact that it appears that in the context of discussing a minimum stipend for somebody who's a 0.59 month appointment, you appear to be in your proposals drawing an equal sign between that appointment and somebody who works 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, in terms of, because the external factor would be, that's what it takes for us to live. That's what I've heard. And your presentation about, you know, budgetary constraints and rent restraints and the component about food and all that. I mean, I appreciate that, but I think we would be kidding ourselves on our side of the table if we didn't raise the issue and say, I understand that you're using that as a metric, but what is the comparison to someone who is actually working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, if at all?
So I will say we have used, and this is just a clarifying point, we have used the cost of living to 12 months. The 9 month is slightly reduced, as you can see. I think it starts off at 26, and the cost of living in Gainesville is about 33,000. So we are at least doing the 52-month span for that. But I think Sikander's point is a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think what maybe you should, and we will consider that, but what you should consider is what's the alternative.
Yeah.
If there shouldn't be an equal sign, that equation there, then what is the alternative?
Because again, we also have
yeah.
international students who
Who
cannot work outside. So this has to be their only source of income. And you're saying that for the 4 to 6 to 7 years that they're here, they are required to live in poverty.
And the other thing you should keep
Because-
in mind is that all of these calculations are based on like a single person with no dependents and, you know, no spouse or anything.
Or
So,
chronic medical conditions.
Yeah.
Not into your-
So we're kind of choosing the minimum of that.
And I think again, forget the numbers aside, I think that the assumptions that we're bringing to the way we're constructing our proposals, and I'm not saying those aren't components of the way that you put yours together, but I think, again, to draw an equal sign between even other UF employees who are not expected to only work 9 months, half-time, there has to be some factor. And to say that it's just the same is I will say, on behalf of our team, we just don't think it's terribly realistic to say that they're exactly the same, because they're clearly not exactly the same. If they were exactly the same, then Article 7 wouldn't exist. And we wouldn't have constant conversations about Article 7 and making sure that we don't have GAs working more than 20 hours a week, which is something that we want to make sure that we honor and we make sure that we deal with.
Yes, I
You
mean,
know.
but also, again, I know we're out of time, but that's also work hours. right? Faculty are often at 0.5 teaching loads and 0.5 research loads. We are carrying over 20 hours of research, and that's not to mention the conferences that we go to, the service work we do that brings prestige to the University of Florida. I have planned a conference, an international conference that was held here. That is more than some full-time faculty in my department have done. I presented 3 conferences a year. I presented at MLA, which is the preeminent conference. This is all prestige that brings up the same level that graduate students do, that also faculty do, but they get paid for it.
And
So-
was that just purely for service to the university, or did you enjoy some intrinsic value
Oh,
to yourself as well?
I mean, I think the same question can be brought up for faculty.
Yeah, except that's part of their appointment letter and it's
Yeah.
part of what they're expected to do, and they are done being a student, and
We're also expected to travel and share our research and represent the university, though.
There are also departments that require you to have publications before you graduate.
and
Horticulture is one.
and do those requirements, are they done in violation of the CBA? Because if they are, then we want to talk about those cases. If you're being given individual assignments into individual units or departments that violate the CBA, then we need to know so we can deal with it.
Well, that's when we file grievances.
Right, which we address. What I'm saying is it's either there's a 20-hour, either we're saying that there's a limit and the CBA defends it and we're going to jointly enforce it, or we're going to say, well, we kind of sort of do, but we want to also represent that we work more than that.
Okay, I mean, why don't you just at your next presentation, tell us how you think that. what the
No, we
work-
will.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
absolutely. I think that's
and
fair.
be clear about it.
Absolutely. No, 100%. No, we certainly will. We certainly will, because I think it's interesting. We had prepared some of the same exact data that you all showed. We just interpreted it significantly differently. So we're gonna show you sort of our version of, and some of the data it looked like it was from the same tables.
I'm sure. There's only so many sources.
Right.
But yeah, so we are out of time.
Okay.
But again, thank you, and I'm looking forward to a really robust conversation next time.
We'll talk next week.
All right,
All right. Thanks.
thank you.
So for folks on Zoom, we'll leave the Zoom open just for a little bit so we can go through some of the chat, but we're going to transition over to our debrief for anyone who's able to join us briefly for a debrief of today's discussion if you'd like.